The theme we have set for ourselves today is fascinating. Parapsychological phenomena have been always an attraction to the human psyche because it is as if they represent a completeness of our incapacity. We see today these ideas spread through cinema. You must have seen X-Men and their powers. Superman, Batman, etc. are quite weak compared to what X-Men can do. They can exercise their mind directly to mold physical reality, influence the weather, influence physical objects, shape or change metal, or read minds, influence minds, and so on. And these images fascinate us because somewhere deep within us we feel we should be able to do it. How many of you perhaps as children would have gone through that experience where you want something to happen so badly that you tell yourself, if I can jump this distance, then it will happen. We do these things as children. It's as if I put enough energy, enough willpower, enough intention, then I can make it happen somehow just by sheer will or mind. That's the feeling we have spontaneously. The truth is, such things are in fact possible. And where people have either spontaneously or by training developed these capacities, they have demonstrated them. But we have faced two problems. One, religious persecution, because such things are seen as perhaps dangerous to the settled order in humanity. And scientific persecution, because the possibility of mind influencing matter destabilizes the current paradigm of science. And so we need to briefly look at the historical and philosophical perspective of why this problem exists, where and how it can be resolved, and then we will look at the science behind the parapsychological phenomena. And in the third part, we will look at practical implications for all of us in our lives. I will go as deep as you are interested in because it is an ocean of knowledge and experience that we will be exploring. But first, to the historical and philosophical perspective, we step back a few centuries to why at all science has a problem with accepting parapsychological phenomena. European science, and I must make that distinction, emerged in revolt against religion. In particular, at a time when the religious influence had taken on a kind of a suffocating, anti-rational position. And the result was, as science emerged, it pushed away anything which opposed rational inquiry and threw out religion itself. In the process of eliminating religion, though, it threw out all things associated with religion, including the underlying principle or idea of spirit, of something that is immanent behind or supporting or forming the appearance of reality. It, in the reaction, focused itself exclusively on a materialistic formulation of reality. Now, all of this would be all right, except that in that exclusivity, it also accepted sectarianism and became in the process as much of what it rejected. It rejected religion, which had become sectarian, and now it became sectarian in rejecting all things associated with religion. And the result is today, if you speak of certain keywords, including keywords used in parapsychology, your paper will not get published. The scientist will ridicule you, will not even look at the evidence. The fact is, and you'll be surprised to know this, There are laboratories all around the world which are experimenting with parapsychological phenomena, replicating them in strict laboratory conditions. Institute of Noetic Sciences is one such, where in completely shielded rooms, they have demonstrated the validity of telepathy, of psychokinesis, of remote viewing, and clairvoyance, of influence at a distance, of technical terms, what we use, Shaktipath, directing an energy to somebody to modify their internal, emotional, mental, and physical states. Now, all of these things have been actually replicated in the strictest laboratory conditions. And while conventional science has rejected these things, the military has found them very useful. In the early 70s, the CIA discovered that Russia had 36 laboratories dedicated to utilizing parapsychological phenomena for military purposes, for spying and for remotely influencing events also. And the CIA said we have to catch up. And they dedicated $20 million in those days to developing a framework in which they could train people in the military to use parapsychological phenomena. They developed a technique called remote viewing, by which, according to CIA's declassified documents, they were already using it to spy not only on other countries, with very high results, often approaching 86% accuracy, where ground level spying got them barely 60% accuracy. They could basically invade any space on Earth and monitor and observe using those techniques. The second thing was they developed this to influence events. They discovered also that they could anticipate events, see a few days ahead and sometimes longer, months ahead, an event before it occurred. And all of these things were used as part of conventional military technology. During the Operation Desert Storm in 1992, when the US invaded Iraq, they were monitoring day to day the troop positions using remote viewing techniques. Now, this is just to tell you that while science may remain blind, self-imposed blindness, technology, and especially military technology, is freely, openly using these techniques. China, in fact, has taken up a similar approach where they're training children not only to remote view but remotely influence physical objects. So they have children sitting in classrooms being trained for this. They are made to stare at an object and raise its temperature or modify its electrical effects effectively by concentrating to knock out a computer. You can see the military application. If there's a missile that is coming to you, you can concentrate on it and knock out its internal guidance system. Well, the missile goes out of control. Now, all of these things are happening right now. But because they're under military overall control, they're kept secret. The CIA recently, about 10 years ago, declassified 10,000 documents involving remote viewing and remote influencing, through which, and something like 50% of it is blacked out, but through which we get a glimpse of how advanced the technology was in the late 70s and early 80s. In fact, the same technology was used to remote view other planets before the NASA probes reached them. And there's a whole documentation around that. I will not go into it right now. Just to tell you that even if science pretends that such things do not exist by its self-chosen reductionism, they do exist and are being used. Where in the process, though, of rejecting all associated with religion, it rejected also the fundamental underlying concept of spirit. I mentioned that. The result was science itself has got fragmented. It is seeking for a unified field theory, but rejected the very principle which was unifying everything in reality. In contrast, and now we come to the other paradigm, the competing paradigm, and which is most likely to be the future paradigm of science and philosophy and practice. That is the Indian paradigm. The Indian paradigm did not have the same historical problems of European science. In India, our starting point was the original Vedic tradition, which started with the key principle of an underlying unity of the cosmos. Upon that unity, within that unity, it saw an emergent multiplicity. So there is the Ekam Sat, underlying truth is one. The emergent multiplicity expressed in Saparyagat, it is he that went forth. Now I will briefly dwell upon this because it also fills our philosophical understanding, but later we will bridge it entirely with the materialist science also. Innate to this idea is that underlying reality is conscious, energetic in its consciousness, and able to freely choose to express itself in multiplicity of forms. So, Saparyagat, it is he that went forth to become the universe. And you see here a very important idea. The underlying unity of the universe is conscious energy, Chit Shakti. Modern science, what does it conclude with? Matter is energy. Energy is following certain rhythms of movement. We don't know why. Those rhythms we classify, we reduce to formula, and we say laws of physics. But the Indian science goes a step further and says it is conscious energy, which consciously chooses to express itself in these rhythms. And therefore the so-called laws of physics are not laws imposed upon us, but are rather are rhythms or habits of this conscious energy. Now you can see how the two things meet at one point, but the Indian approach goes much deeper. And in its very depths, you find the key to the freedom. The freedom from those very compelling laws. The laws are no more imposed upon us as unchangeable, permanent, but they are only habitual rhythms in nature. And the third idea which comes from this is that in this movement of manifestation, there are many levels. Kavir, Manishi, Paribhu, Swayambhu, these are the terms used to describe broadly the approaches. Brahman itself is described as fourfold, of which the outermost superficial reality that we experience, objectively shared by us, the material world, is its superficial most layer, the waking state. Behind that, the dream state, in which there is a subjective experience which forms the outer objective experience. Behind that, the creative poise, which is the sleep state, where he envisions before moving to manifest. And that's why the third state is described as eyes closed, and then there is the transcendence in which there is the complete freedom from space, time, and manifestation. Now, all of these concepts, because they are so profound, because they are not reductionist in matter, were rejected by European science as being merely philosophy or even religion. But you can see they describe in a very comprehensive and complete way the nature of reality, which is what science is looking for also. The fourth important concept which emerges in the Vedic perspective from this is that reality is synthetic and continuous. In the Isha Upanishad, Tadejati, Tannejati, Taddure, Tadvantike, Tad Antarasya Sarvasya, Tadu Sarvasyasya Bahyatya. That is moving, that is not moving. That is far away, that is near. That is within all this, that is outside all this. And the idea is there is one underlying reality which unites all of this. And because it is continuous, the underlying truth is not particulate, but continuity. And here we come to the core problem of modern physics. Is reality particulate or is it continuous? Is it a wave or is it a particle? And the problem is you see both in your experiments, but it has to be one which is somehow the origin of the other, isn't it? And the Indian perspective goes straight to the continuity as the underlying principle. Waveforms expressed in continuity, of which particulate are phenomena. The fifth important concept which emerges from this is that the universe is holographic inherently and it is fractal. Jagatyam Jagat, that is universe within universe. And Jagat itself, the word tells you, describes what is universe. Unlike the English term universe, which means only one whole, Jagat conveys a much more profound meaning. Ja, born or emerging from, existing by, Gat, Gati, speed, movement. That which emerges out of movement, exists by movement, is sustained by movement. Its very existence is the movement. Such is the description of the universe, which also conventional physics teaches us. As long as there is the movement of energy, a particle remains stable. As long as the particles are in movement, the atom remains stable. As long as the atoms are in constant undergoing change of energy between them, constant interchange, the structure of the molecule is constant, and so on. According to current physics, if you take an object, however solid it may be, metallic, it is in fact 99.99999% empty space. It's formed of whirls of energy, cutting out, carving out spaces. And the whole thing is like a foam formed by moving energy. If that movement stops, poof, the whole thing vanishes. Instantly, there is no physical reality. All lapses into so-called emptiness, except it's not empty. According to conventional physics, when you enter quantum chromodynamics and some other quantum variations, they speak of an underlying energy which is so humongous that if you take 1 cubic centimeter of empty space, it has enough zero-point energy to evaporate all the oceans of the earth instantly. That's the kind of energy which is held in so-called empty space. There is no real empty space. It is ocean of energy. Chit Shakti, recall. So you see here a complete correspondence between the Indian approach to science and the European science, but without the limitations that European science carries with it and the luggage, the baggage that it carries from its historical rejection and revolt against religion. Yet, the structure, the framework offered by the Vedic perspective is also rational, empirically verifiable, open to theorizing, experimenting, and validation. It is self-correcting in that sense as science is. I use these two words, holographic and fractal, because in the very term Jagatyam Jagat, the idea is universe within universe. Each object, if you go deep into it, you will find an infinity of finer particles or finer distinctions that you can make, all of which can be mapped entirely to the totality of the universe and is in fact connected with the whole. Every part is a representation of the whole. Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande, you're familiar with these terms. I'm making brief references. Those who are familiar with the terms, you will recognize it. The idea being, as in the microcosm, so in the macrocosm, the two are related. So every object is in fact the whole universe taking a special front. And this is the basic concept of holography. The whole is represented in the part. Each part captures a perspective on the whole. I suppose you're familiar with a hologram. You've seen a hologram, 3D hologram, you can turn it around and you can see the 3D picture. But the real importance of a hologram is not that it is a 3D image. It's that if you cut the image into half, each half gives you the full picture. That is amazing. You cut that half again into a quarter, each quarter gives you the full picture, but from a narrow perspective. And so the whole universe is like that. The whole universe is one underlying whole which cannot be cut up. The act of cutting up only reduces the degree of its expression, but does not eliminate its wholeness. And so this concept comes straight out of the Vedic perspective and is in fact approached by the conventional European science through its reductionist viewpoint, now turning to explore reality. And fractal, that is each part expressing, is somehow a symbol and representation of a whole in its expression. In all this you see, while the European science rejected the underlying principle of spirit, which unites, the Indian science built itself upon this underlying unifying principle. And therefore, we may say, as science approaches a unified field theory, it will converge with the Vedic perspective more and more. And this is what we see, in fact, in the last 100 years, beginning with quantum mechanics, where the scientists themselves draw upon the Upanishadic traditions to justify or enunciate their concepts and to draw similarities between quantum mechanics and modern physics and philosophy of the Upanishads. In fact, if you go to CERN, that is the European super collider, where they do the particle physics experiments of the most advanced kind, the highest energy levels, at the entrance of CERN is a gigantic statue of Shiva, the dancing poise of Shiva Nataraja, precisely to remind us of this close correspondence. You may have heard of much of this, which is being so openly talked about today in quantum physics circles. So therefore, the convergence of modern science with the Indian approach to science, Indian paradigm of science, is inevitable. But now we come to the distinction that it makes for our theme of parapsychology. While the European approach to science, the European paradigm of science, rejects paranormal phenomena simply because they are non-material or cannot be explained purely by material means, the Indian approach suggests it, implies it, in fact. The moment you accept that there is an underlying unity and all matter is energy, which is conscious energy, consciousness, including our own individual awareness, can modify and influence energy, which will influence material processes. The chain is complete, and the implications are inevitable. You can ignore them, but they still remain. Not only they are inevitable, but because this is a tradition that goes back now nearly 10,000 years, it has also developed means to experiment with this reality, this dimension of reality, means to develop the capacity for the parapsychological effects. In fact, the underlying concept in yoga is that all of us have this ability. It is just undeveloped. For example, we may say all of our bodies are capable of, let's say, doing a handstand. Have you ever tried it? Many of you might never have tried it. If you try it now, you will fail. But just because you fail, you cannot say that it is impossible. Others who have trained for it and developed it can do a handstand and keep their balance for many minutes, isn't it? And if you look at the underlying physiology of your body, you can say, yes, it should be possible for me also, but I will have to train more or train less. Equally, there are some people who are naturally skilled and some people who take a little longer, but in principle, everybody can. The same principle applies to our mental powers. Do you have the power of logic? Maybe when you were 5 years old, it might not have been so developed. But if you look at the underlying reality of the mind and its operations, it's inevitable. It's only a question of how much you develop it, isn't it? Someone who has gone through a formal training of logic will have a much sharper, effective logical faculty than someone who may not have utilized it so much. The same can be said of parapsychological abilities. The fact that we are conscious, our consciousness influences our energy, and our energy influences our biology. And the fact that our consciousness is not limited merely to our body, but extends beyond our body, and therefore can influence energy beyond our body and matter beyond our body. Just this fact implies, without doubt, all of us have an innate parapsychological ability. Now, these things may pop up spontaneously. They may happen in a mild way, and it would have happened to all of us. Let me remind you of a time when you picked up your phone to call somebody and the phone rang and it was that person calling you. Has it happened to you? How many of you it has happened to? Yes. And how often it happens? You will notice some people it happens more often, some people less often. And those people to whom it happens more often, if you go deeper into their personality, you will find certain common features. They may, for example, have a vivid dream life. They may recall dreams more easily. They may have conscious dreams in which during the dream they're conscious that they are dreaming. And you can train this capacity until in the midst of the dream you can become conscious that you're dreaming and choose to change your dream. Has it ever happened to you? In the dream, and you can train it. The training process may take about a week or 2 weeks, depending on your aptitude. But by a sustained effort, we can get any one of us to become conscious in the dream state, conscious that you're dreaming, and the moment you have that, you're able to shape your dream, will things to happen. Now you'll wonder, what does that have to do with parapsychology? I'll come to that shortly. You may have seen the movie, which is called Inception, yes, where they enter the dream world and shape reality. Literally, you are able to do that when you're conscious in the dream. You can choose to fly. How many of you have had flying dreams? Now, here's the interesting thing. All of this is common to all of us. Question only how much you remember. It's common to all of us because of the underlying form of our personality. I'm using a slightly complex term. I'm not saying physiology, because physiology limits us to the biology only. The psychological layers within are common, just as the biological foundations are common. And here we step back briefly to look at the underlying framework described in the Indian paradigm of science. Not only reality is multi-layered, we discussed that briefly earlier, but we ourselves, being a microcosm of the macrocosm, are multi-layered. So the yogic science describes us as having 5 bodies, pancha kosha. Kosha is described as a sheath covering something else, which is an underlying innate truth. You call that Atman, soul. Each one of us is something which is permanent, eternal in essence, having these layers of sheaths which are not permanent, which are not eternal. But through those layers, each layer becoming denser and grosser, on the last layer we engage with the material world at a material level of reality. But on each of the sheaths, we engage with the universe at its level of reality. Reality being one with multi-levels, we exist on many levels at the same time, and on each we operate. To the extent that we are primarily embedded in the physical body awareness, we are less aware of those other layers. But in dream state, when your body awareness goes to sleep, those other layers are accessible. And your wandering experiences on those layers are what we call dream. Now you see the connection. If in dream state you're more conscious, you have access to those levels of reality, and you can connect that access to your waking state, then you can tap into that access here and now while in body awareness. Or those who have that link strongly built up in themselves naturally tend to have these premonitions, intuitions, or even certain other parapsychological abilities. Now you can see here the starting point of the science of the parapsychological phenomena. Not only within us, there are multi-layers, but in other objects also there are multiple layers. A tree, for example, is not merely the physical, biological substance only. It has also psychological layers. Now we have to use these terms because the English language is not sufficiently developed. But if we use the Sanskrit term from the yoga tradition, we will say Annamaya Kosha, that is the gross body. Why we call it Annamaya? Anna is food, right? It's called food sheets, literally translated. It sounds weird when you say it in English. But when you look at the underlying concept, the material world and matter is such, everything is undergoing decay. While it, in order to sustain itself, to prevent decay, it has to take in other matter and eat up. So our body needs to eat food in order to survive. But the thing we are eating itself is eating something else, which is eating something else. And while we are eating it, we are being eaten from within by the bacteria, by the viruses, by the various other cellular processes. So the eater, while eating, is himself being eaten. And this is the nature of the physical domain of reality. And therefore this world they call Annamaya. You see, the vocabulary is very precise. It catches the characteristic of it. This is not the case on the higher gradations of substance. So we call this material, but it is also substance as we move higher gradations. At that point we call it Pranamaya. Prana is force, energy, pure energy. Energy not bound to form. Okay? Unlike in the physical world where form is first, energy is subservient. So when you speak of energy, you speak of potential energy, you speak of electrical energy, you speak of nuclear energy, chemical energy, etc. But what is the difference? Energy is the same. It is only the container in which the energy is held which makes for all these variations, right? But the energy underlying is the same. Now let's take the example of the fan. As the fan is moved, you switch on the electricity, the fan starts moving. The thing which is moving the fan itself doesn't move. The wires don't move. There's no fluid flowing through the wires. There's electricity, we say, but have you seen electricity? Can you measure its flow? In fact, when we measure the flow of electrons, we find the electrons moving at 6 centimeters per second. But the electricity which is moving this is coming from 10,000 kilometers instantly, literally. Speed of light perhaps, not 6 centimeters per second. What is moving at that high speed? Not the electrons. It's a pressure wave. Let me take an analogy. If right now there's an earthquake in New Delhi and the ground shakes, and as a result something in Pondicherry ground shakes a little bit, will we say the earthquake from there moved matter all the way to Pondicherry instantaneously? No. What came through was a pressure wave, meaning the earthquake there pushed something, which pushed something, which pushed something, which pushed something, until this got shaken. But nothing from there came here physically. What came here was the pure force, pure pressure, non-material, acting through matter. You see the point? The force itself does not have a form and does not have a material character. It can act through material processes. That pure force represents a grade of reality. All energy processes, all forces are forming that level of reality. We call it pranamaya. If you look at any biological process driven by energy and force, it is prana. In the physical domain, if you free up prana from its biological and physical containers, making it more and more abstract, you come to a level which is pure force, which is approaching what we call electric fields, electricity. Have you ever seen an electric field? Can you interact with an electric field? No, but you know it exists. You describe it with your mathematics, but you can never touch it or see it. It is almost immaterial. Perhaps it is immaterial, but not non-existent. It represents a domain of reality which is non-gross physical. And yet it is the cause of all physical processes. You remove that, all physical processes break down. And so they describe how all matter is energy. Energy is essentially pure force, prana, and prana following certain rhythms and movements. What makes it follow those rhythms and movements? Remember we discussed earlier, Chit Shakti, conscious energy. So consciousness behind the prana, of which prana is an expression, that consciousness wills it, chooses it. Now we come to two very interesting concepts. First, the whole universe is sustained by universal prana and a universal chit, intention, consciousness, of which we ourselves and our biology are a part. But being a part of it, in us also there is a prana, which is part of the universal prana, and a consciousness, chit, which is part of the universal chit. But because we are self-aware, we can modify our consciousness. Unlike the tree, which is not self-aware and cannot modify, is driven by the habit of the universal prana, we can say, I don't want to get angry. And I stop myself from getting angry. Can you do that? Can you stop yourself from getting angry? Sometimes, not always. But if you make effort, you grow in capacity. And there are people who have made such a mastery of their movement of emotions that they can choose to be not angry at all. You've met such people? Rare, but they made effort, they could do it. If you make the effort, you can do it also. And it's not difficult, it just means you have to try. You'll be surprised to know there are animals which are so much more developed than us. There's an experiment done with dolphins, where they opened the brain of the dolphin to see what are the centers of emotions and trigger them. They were trying, basically, it was a US military project, to use dolphins like robots to be able to plant bombs on ships and things like that. But they wanted to see if they could control the dolphins' thoughts and emotions. So they were probing the brain, and they probed the portion which triggers anger. And like the human brain, if you trigger the part that relates to anger, the person suddenly gets angry. So when they first triggered the brain of the dolphin and made it angry, the dolphin expressed anger, then it expressed surprise. It was surprised that it was angry, and then it willed itself to stop the anger. And it stopped being angry. And then all they continued to trigger, as much as they continued to trigger, it refused to get angry. Imagine what an advanced mastery it has over its emotions. In many ways superior to the human. We often have to learn to control our anger. How many years we have perhaps spent as children trying to restrain our anger, isn't it? Of course, we didn't follow a regular discipline. If you followed a discipline, you could do it much faster. But we just did it haphazardly. When we got angry, we tried to control. But the dolphin has the capacity already innate as part of its overall evolution. To that extent, in its emotional self-control, it is superior to human beings evolutionarily. Perhaps it may lack the full development of the rational power. Perhaps it may lack the full development of the fingers, which allows us to express our rational power in the world to organize our life. What use would it be if you were an armchair scientist and technologist with all the concepts but unable to actualize them if you didn't have your fingers? Perhaps dolphins are like that. Perhaps they have advanced concepts of awareness but are unable to articulate. And this is very likely also in many ways. But the point being, they were more developed. They are more developed than us emotionally, in their control of emotions. I'm pointing to this because I'm showing you how in the trees the same prana operates as it operates in us. But the distinctive part in us is the self-awareness by which we can modify our emotions and energies, modify the direction of our prana. The result is we are then able to modify the action of the prana on matter and in matter. Your biology, your mind are linked by the prana. Your mind can drive the life energy which drives the biology. If you will yourself strongly enough, you can modify the life energy and therefore modify biology. Does that sound too far off? When I lift my hand, that's what I'm doing. I intended to lift my hand. My intention kick-started an energy flow process through the brain, through nervous system, which triggers the musculature, which has its own energy, chemical energy, which are released, and the hand follows, right? It's not a big deal. We already have hardwired within us processes that link the awareness through energy to biology, matter. These are hardwired evolutionarily. But we can now bypass some of those processes and effectively get results far greater than what the current developed process can have. Now I'm going to take a few examples here. Under hypnosis, there are many interesting experiments, and you can see them being done. You'll check on YouTube, many dramatic experiments. And I'll name a few now. Suppose one of you, youngest here, strongest perhaps, is asked to come here, and I tell you to lie down with your head on a chair and your feet on another chair with nothing in between to support your back. Use your stomach muscles, tighten them, and remain rigid like this. Do you think you can do it? The strongest person among you will probably fail. And yet, any one of us, including the weakest among us, can be brought here and made to become stiff under hypnosis. And the stiffened body can be placed like this, and you will be able to hold your body rigid. In fact, you will see these demonstrations on YouTube. The hypnotist picks someone from the audience, makes them rigid like this with feet on one chair, head on another chair, and then he sits on their stomach, doubling the weight, and the person stays rigid. Then you pull them out of the hypnosis and ask them to do the same, they cannot. What happened under hypnosis? Let me give you another example. Under the same hypnotic condition, you may be told that this pen is a burning stick of incense. It's approached to your finger, you have the fear, it's burning, right? The moment it touches, you'll say, ouch, it burns. And after a few seconds, a burn mark forms on the hand. Now explain this to me. This pen, which is just a piece of plastic perhaps, room temperature, touches your skin and a burn mark forms. Because under hypnosis, you believed it is burning. How do you explain this? It's not passing through the normal evolved channels of mind, energy, body, bypassing those channels. Okay? Because in the body consciousness, there is the conviction that it has been burnt. The body starts the process of healing the burn. And all the rest follows. But the chain is exactly the same. Mind, energy, body. Only it's not following the conventional nervous system connection, but a different channel of influence. Does that make sense? And you can see here the beginning of an extraordinary range of phenomena. Two things I will point to. First, the placebo effect. You know what is the placebo effect? When you're given medicine, if you're told that this is good medicine, it already has an effect on your illness. It cures you, even though it is actually a sugar pill. And in conventional medicine, in allopathic medicine, they try to eliminate the placebo effect. That is why they have to do double-blind trials. So they'll have two groups of people, one to whom a placebo is given, another to whom the conventional medicine is given. Let's assume now both have diabetes, okay? So the conventional medicine given, the people have, let's say 46% of the people have an improvement. The placebo group, you will find 30% people having an improvement. How do you explain that? That's a large number, 30%. Isn't it? They believed they were given medicine which will heal their diabetes, and they actually get healed. Isn't that amazing? Just that belief. Now explain to me the chain. Your mind convinced that you are being healed affects the energy flow and its rhythms, which affects the biology processes, and you actually get healed. Now can you see how important this connection is? It's not part of the conventional biologically evolved link, but it is part of your psychological evolved link. If you believe it deeply enough, it affects your biology processes. Or the reverse. If you're given medicine and you're told this is poison, and you believe it is poison, it affects you biologically and you have all the symptoms of the poisoning. Between the conventional medicine and the effect here of the placebo, the difference is barely 20% typically. In fact, and here's the shocking part, in certain blind studies, they discover that 80% of all illnesses can be cured by placebo alone. What does that mean for conventional medicine? You can see how useless it all seems to be. If you could tap straight into the placebo effect, not the placebo itself, the placebo effect within us, you can actually get rid of 80% of your illnesses. So this is one whole range of phenomena where your mind is directly affecting the biology. Now I'm going to ask you something very important. Observe in yourself how much of your own belief affects your health, affects your emotions and your physical health. There's a whole programming out there which tells you to be sensitive to certain things, certain triggers, and to fall sick. How many of you have seen on television advertisements which show a child playing in the rain. He comes home and goes, achoo. And then mother has to give him special balm on his chest and smell, and he gets better. Right? Do you know before that balm was invented, we used to play in the rain, we never got sick. But from the time we were told, don't get wet in the rain, you will catch a cold, we began to learn to get sick. You will not see animals getting wet in the rain who catch a cold, ever. I'll give you an example historically. This is one of the most dramatic recorded instances, but there are many such. In South America, there was a tribe of people that lived bare-bodied in the snow. Extreme south, near the Antarctic region. They lived bare-bodied in the snow. And when the first European evangelists came there, they told them out of goodwill, you know what, you'll catch pneumonia, you should learn to cover yourself. And they taught them, oh, you're not covering yourself enough, you'll catch a pneumonia, be careful. Soon after, they all died out of pneumonia. How much of the programming is affecting us deeply, biologically, physically? You will see in the last 30, 40 years in particular, a sudden bursting out of so many illnesses we have never had in humanity. So much of it is coming from bad food. So much of it is coming from toxins we put in the food itself. The pesticides which you put in the food to protect it from pests are coming into your body. If you've grown up in Pondicherry, your bloodstream and your body has large quantity of DDT. In fact, a study showed that in Pondicherry, mother's milk produced by her body for the child, supposed to be the most purified with the maximum filtration designed by nature. Mother's milk has higher levels of DDT than permissible. And that's what she's feeding a newborn child. Where does the DDT come from? It's manufactured in industries based in America, where it is banned for use, but permitted for manufacture and export to India, where it is permitted for use. And so here, happily, we are taught by the media, by the industries, with their programming, DDT is safe, don't worry, spray it liberally. And when it enters the body cannot distinguish the molecular structure of DDT from fat, and it starts accumulating it in your fat. And it leads to a whole series of other complications. I'm giving you just one example here to show how there is a whole perversion in the modern lifestyle. Physically, with poisons being dumped into our system. But at the same time, psychologically, there are poisons, toxins coming in by this programming that says, you are weak, you are dependent, you need medicine to get well. And I'm going to point out one more experience you've all had. Sometime when you were sick, when you had a fever or whatever it was, in that state of sickness, when doctor came to you, you were waiting for doctor, and doctor came to you, do you observe what happens to your body? Doctor says, don't worry, you'll get well. Here, take this medicine. You take the medicine, and before you can eat it, you're already feeling better. Have you experienced that? It happens to all of us. And at that point, you could stop and say, I'm feeling better. I don't need the medicine. But if you stop there and you believe the medicine necessary, then you will find the effect fades out. Deepak Chopra narrates a very interesting event which took place in a laboratory in a hospital in the US, where there was this person with a particular form of cancer. He was dying, he was on his deathbed, he couldn't get up from his bed. And the doctor said, you know, we've tried everything failed, but there is one new medicine which is being tested right now. If you like, we can try it on you because, well, everything else has failed anyway. So the patient says, all right, I want to get well. He takes the medicine, he's given the treatment. Within a week, he's up and he's walking about in the corridors of the hospital. He's so good. A couple of weeks down, the doctor comes back to him and says, oh, by the way, the results of that medicine have come. It has failed completely all the trials. But somehow with you, it has worked. So let's just continue it. A week later, the fellow was back in his bed, dying, and he died. The conviction innate within us that this will heal or not. You see how important that is. Now, if this power is inherent in you, I'm coming now to the practical implication. You can heal yourself by willing it, by intending it, by increasing your innate conviction. I'm using the word conviction, and I'm going to use another word which has some problems, and so I will redefine the word: faith. If your faith that you're well, that you won't fall sick, well, you will get well, you won't fall sick. I'm going to quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Krishna says, Yo yat shraddheya sa eva sa. That which is your innate faith, that is what you become. Now I'm going to redefine this word faith because it is associated with belief. Because in many religious teachings, they will tell you, you must have faith. But what they tell you is, you must believe what I say. And that doesn't work. Right? Because sometimes what I say is not rational. You must have faith that God will heal you. Oh yeah, I tried that. I prayed so many times. It didn't work. What are you telling me? I must believe? Okay, I will try. Yes, I believe. But I don't. Faith is not belief. Faith is an innate knowing within you, and you are what you know yourself to be. I give an example. I tell you that, and I will show you with all the physics and all the biology knowledge of modern science, that your body and your identity are just a bundle of nerves and electron waves in your brain which make you think that you exist when actually your individuality doesn't exist. And you can show that with the conventional belief system of physics and biology. Now I ask you, what is your experience? Do you know you exist? You say, yes. I will go a little deeper. In that sense that where you know you exist, do you know there is a sense of purpose in your life, or is it just by chance? And if you go deep within you, you will feel that there is a sense of purpose. I know there is something important, something precious, something to be done, something to be realized. I don't know what, but I know something is important. It's not by chance. That innate knowing is the Shraddha, loosely translated in English as faith. The root sounds Shrat and Dha. Dha is same as dharma, holding, upholding, containing, supporting, okay? And Shrat is essence, essential truth. The clinging to the essential truth of your being, that is Shraddha. And that's what you experience deep inside you. When you experience that and you know you are well, you are well. Yo yat shraddheya. Whatever you experience as your innate faith, sa eva sa, that is what you become. Now you see how important this concept is? It's not a belief system in the mind, it's an innate knowing. And in that innate knowing, you will find all your potential is held. As a child, when you were first told, here is a gap, a crevice, jump across it. You look at that and you're afraid. And then you gather yourself. If you don't have the conviction that you can jump, you won't be able to jump. But when you gather yourself and you know you can do it, with that you jump and you succeed. That transition where you drew out from within you an innate knowing of your capacity, that was the key which made the rest possible. You see the point I'm getting at? Deep within us is an innate knowing in which the full potential of the whole universe is held. We are one in identity with that. And in that all infinite potential, anything can be drawn out. And because we know we can do it, therefore we try to do it. If you didn't have that, you couldn't even attempt it, remember. This is the starting point of all our efforts. The whole human quest for realizing anything, whether it is climbing the mountain and mastering a field of knowledge or achieving something which has never been done, everything, the quest for knowledge, the quest for power, the quest for harmony, beauty, love, everything emerges from some deep innate knowing which comes from your innate being, that is your soul, self. And from there, rippling through the Panchakosha, 5 layers, that innate knowing being ripples out until it hits your most physical layers and impacts them and their processes. And in continuity, there's no gap anywhere. In between, we have the mental awareness, we have the life energy awareness, prana, and then the gross body awareness, which are all in continuity, embedded, influencing each other. Okay? Now you can see here, you have a profound framework with profound implications for your personal life. Anything potentially is possible if you can draw from within you that innate knowing or capacity. I have used here certain terms which are common to religious terms, philosophical terms, parapsychological terms, and even psychology and biology terms. But here is a framework in the Indian paradigm where all these are connected seamlessly and the implications span all of these. Where no more splitting knowledge and experience. So I took two examples so far, under hypnosis, what can happen, and then the placebo principle. I'm going to take a third. I could give you many more examples, but which are extraordinary in their implications. So the third example, which was there recently, took place in a conference we had in the US, under the US government's public health framework. They were discussing introduction of yogic principles into the public health framework in order to amplify the benefits. And there was a conversation. Somebody presented the distinction between the European approach and the Indic approach, where this underlying unity of the 5 levels, etc. And then the question came from someone in the audience, a practitioner, a medical practitioner. He said, we have seen cases where, medically, a person has a split personality. And in one personality, he has diabetes. In another personality, he doesn't have diabetes, but he has a kidney problem. And when the personality switches, the biological illness switches instantly sometimes. How do you explain that? This was the question. And the person, the speaker in that conference, he said, the only explanation we have is that our energy body, pranamaya sharira, is far more important in the overall working of the physical body and health than we have supposed it to be. The biological body is almost like a plastic container into which you put the energy body that shapes it, like the air in the balloon shapes it. You switch the energy pattern and the illness pattern changes in the gross physical processes. Now here we are touching something which is really far out. It explains a whole range of phenomena which we dismiss as psychosomatic diseases. You understand, there are people who have illnesses which are so deeply rooted in the biology, and yet they undergo a switch in their thinking or in their emotional habits, and poof, the disease vanishes overnight. Or spontaneous remission of extremes of illnesses, including extremes of cancer, where the person is practically on the deathbed, he goes through a prayer, or he goes through a kind of an epiphany of psychological change, and poof, the disease is gone overnight. And these are documented medically. The X-rays are there to prove it, that it has happened overnight. But since there's no explanation in the current framework of European science, biology and medicine, these examples are set aside as anecdotal, although the evidence is strong, because they can't be explained. But here we have a framework that explains them and makes it accessible for us, in fact, to be able to tap into such processes which are all potentially effective in all of us. So I'm going to set this part aside now and look at the larger implications of our action in the world, not just within ourselves. Remember, our life energy extends beyond the body, gross body. It is a larger aura, we call it, which can be today measured, recorded with high voltage devices called Kirlian photography. A series of experiments which began now 60 or 70 years ago, which show that this aura has an independent existence. So you take a leaf, take a Kirlian photograph, you see the leaf shape and the energy body around it, radiating energy. You cut the leaf and take a Kirlian photograph. You can see the cut of the physical leaf, but the energy body is intact, at least for a few hours. And then gradually the energy body dims in the part it is cut off and fades out there. By observing the Kirlian photograph of your finger, the doctor is now able to assess your internal psychological state and your physical health. That's the extent to which this science has been developed. the aura extends well beyond. But it is an energy aura which is formed of our awareness. And to that extent, we are able to influence the energy in that space and the biological processes or physiological processes in that space. But this aura is not limited to just a physical range. It is plastic, it is elastic. I'll give you an example here. You've all ridden a scooter at least, right? Some of you have driven cars. Okay? If you've driven a car or if you've watched someone driving a car, sometimes you're in a very tight parking area, you take the car out, you cannot see the edge of the bumper, but you can sense it. And you know this is missing by barely 2 centimeters and you're able to do it. But you sense it, right? With the scooter, similarly, when you pass very close to something, you don't need to look and check. You can sense, I barely scraped through by a centimeter or 2. It's as if your awareness expands to include the machine that you are riding. A similar thing happens even in larger spaces. A captain of a ship, and I've interviewed captains in the Indian Navy, they will tell you this. They're so identified with their ship that they can feel when something is wrong. The captain sitting right on top says, something is wrong with the engine. He calls up the engine room and they say, yes, we're having some difficulty. There's a problem with the bearings. How does he sense that? Because his consciousness extends to include all that, which is his responsibility, his domain, his physical reality even. I interviewed one of the admirals in the Indian Navy and I asked him, what's your relationship with the ship? He says, it's more intimate than my wife. I know this ship as if myself. And that's when you can sense it. If you don't have that kind of identification, you cannot sense it. But when you have it, your aura extends to include that physical space. And when you do that, you can sense things happening, but you can also influence things. Ingo Swann was one of the very famous researchers in this field. Well, he was researched upon more than he researched, but he also researched. And he was one of the prime targets of the CIA's military program for developing psychokinetic abilities. He demonstrated in the laboratory this capacity. He concentrated on an object at a distance through all the barriers of electromagnetic waves, which they could create, the Faraday cage and all that. Concentrating on an object, he could make it grow hot at will. 2 objects kept, he's asked to select the left one or the right one, he makes it hot, just concentrating on it. Compare that with Swami Rama, who was also tested in the US labs in similar circumstances. They could point to any part of his body and he would concentrate on it and make it hot. So he was demonstrating on his palm to make a finger hot or another finger hot. And then suddenly he felt his awareness gripping the hand in such a way, he said, wait, now I'll show you something extraordinary. I've never done it before, but I will do it before you. And in the lab, he showed how one part of his palm he heated up, another part he made cool down at the same time. But if you think about it, it's not different from moving your arms. Your awareness entering through the energy into the matter, sensing it from inside, can modify it. It's as simple as that. The skill is now putting your awareness inside and feeling the energy and then shaping, willing the energy to change. But if you can do it inside your biology, you can also do it outside the biology where your aura extends, isn't it? And if your aura is plastic enough, you can extend it to pretty much any distance. It's on this basis that the CIA then developed a series of programs. Some of that was presented in a movie which was called The Men Who Stare at Goats. Have you seen that movie? Do look it up. It was about this program where they trained people to concentrate on a goat and slow down his heartbeat until at some point they could slow it down enough that the goat just fell down dead. The idea was, of course, can you assassinate people? The technology itself was refined, it was developed and then classified. Whether they use it, we don't know, but one of the things which we know from people who practiced it and who have spoken about it was they found they could do it on goats easily, but on human beings it was a little more complex. Because why? The personal will of the human being senses this intrusion of an external energy. wills or blocks it out. Now you're entering a whole strange domain. So one of these describes how they were asked to spy on a particular facility in Russia. They projected themselves, their consciousness there, went in and observed. They watched some people there, and the people who they watched sensed their presence and turned in their direction and recognized their presence. And so immediately they came back, and then those people chased them and entered their presence, and there was a whole struggle that took place at an occult level. Now this is, remember, the US military, which is documenting these kinds of experiments. Just shows you that that whole level of reality is as real, as vivid as this, and influences from there this. So now I'm not going to go too much into this kind of stuff because it's interesting but not relevant to our focus. We have so far formulated a framework rooted in the Indic tradition, which shows you a continuity of a gross physical science through a psychological science, through parapsychological phenomena, and even into the domain of spiritual reality in continuity. Within us, all these levels are in continuity. Therefore, within us, this connection can be consciously exercised. Outside us, equally, it can be extended. When I influence the leaf in the plant, it is my energy and its life energy which are entering in connection. Therefore, as they say, if you speak to the plants, they grow better. Isn't it? They sense and there's an energy exchange. Or if I extend my energy into yours, I can help you heal, and so on. So we have a framework now in which all these phenomena become not only inevitable, but also because of the nature of the completeness of the knowledge, you can develop technologies to train for and develop these capacities. So I'm going to pause here, and I will invite your questions on anything we have discussed or anything we have not discussed. And I will let you drive the rest of the discussion for the next, we have 20 minutes about? Okay.
Because you mentioned
Yes.
Deepak Chopra, chakra healing, how does that function?
Okay. So chakra healing, the concept is very simple. Just as our biology has certain focal points of its processes. In the nervous system, the center is the brain. For the emotions, we have the hormonal centers, the endocrine systems, etc. So too in the energy body, there are focal points of the energy flows. In your awareness, which works through the energy body, you will find your awareness naturally coalescing around these energy centers. Let me give an example. If you had to observe in yourself, where do you feel your awareness is located in your body? Can you describe to me? Just feel, where are you located in the body? Where do you feel yourself? Or if you're not sure, let's try this experiment. Touch two parts. Touch the shoulder and your elbow. Which feels closer to you? Do it. Do it right now. Which feels closer to you? Shoulder. Shoulder and temple, which feels closer to you? Check it out. Which is closer? Temple? Between temple and forehead, which feels closest to you? Forehead. Which part of the forehead is closest? Touch everywhere. You'll all come here pretty much, isn't it? Anyone came to anywhere else in the body? So most of us will end up here as the point closest to the sense of I. I. Right? Why? Because this is the center of your thinking awareness. When I think, the top of my head is above me, my jaws are below me, I am somewhere here inside, right? This is a focal point, energy focal point of the grade of your mental awareness. Now let's look at another focal point. If you have to express in gesture, in mime, and you want to convey I, how will you say I? With hand gesture, what will you do? I. You won't say I. You'll say ayo, but I. Now here you get a headache. Oh God, why is it so bad? But here is I. Here you have a different I, here you have a different I. What's this I here? I am, I exist. Here, I think, I'm aware. You see, this is much more your existence, your identity. And you feel you're more here. There's another third center, When you lean over the top of a building and look down from a height and you get the fear in your body, where does it hit you? Where do you feel the pulling back in fear? Abdomen. This is the physical center of your awareness where the instinct of fear is seated. That's where, when that becomes too strong, you feel as if you're going to lose control of your bowels. Here is the emotional center, but also your deeper identity of existence. That's why we say your soul is here. This is the most sacred part of you, because deep within here, behind the emotions, is your deepest truth, your spirit. Here is your mental awareness. From here you think, you plan, you organize, etc. So there are other such centers. Now, depending on the grade of your difficulty, we would tap into that center. If you had a strong problem of emotional jealousy, etc., which you generally feel here, the correction for that will be to open your heart with love, with compassion, right? If you have a problem with your thoughts, then it is here in the head that you will try to bring a calm and a quiet. So the concept is there are many centers of energy, different grades of energy and operations. And so just as in the biology we map out all the organs, in the energy body we map out all the centers and then the channels from those centers, the nadis. And there are complex maps. The same principle extended becomes the basis of acupuncture. In Kerala, there's a very advanced technique of warfare known as Skalari Payat. You must have heard about it. We had many such techniques even in Tamil Nadu. We have a very advanced technique, Silambu, is it? Huh? Silambatam. It's not, the knowledge has mostly been lost. In Kerala, it still survives for various reasons. There, the more advanced training in Kalaripayat teaches you how to defeat an enemy without touching and without weapons. So recently there was somebody who had failed the training and so he had been rejected from the system and he demonstrated in public. Otherwise they're sworn to secrecy. So somebody was asked to rush towards him with a knife. He pointed a finger at one of the energy centers and instantly the other fellow became unconscious and fell down. Focal point here, for example, where your sense of self-awareness in the mind is, if you can somehow neutralize that, you will lose self-awareness and fall unconscious. In the Chinese system of acupuncture, they demonstrated this, and this is video recorded. They did an open heart surgery with the patient completely conscious. The chest is open, split up, and the heart is being operated upon, and the patient is talking to them. They put a cardboard so he can't see what's happening there, otherwise he'd freak out. How did they do it? By tapping into the nerve channels of energy, they made the whole chest numb. By blocking certain flows, encouraging other flows, once you know the whole mapping, you can do pretty much anything. It's a whole technology at that point, right? So that becomes a whole system of medicine, a whole approach, once you know the energy body and can map it. So this becomes the basis of a whole energy-based healing technology. I don't go into details because within that there are many variations one could take. But once you understand the principle, it seems so simple.
Actually, this Kalaripayat Kerala technique which you said reminded me once when I went to Badrinath. The Nambudri there is called the Ravan,
Yes.
the chief priest who is a descendant Bal Brahmachari Shankaracharya Parampara. So they are the people who officiate there as the chief priest.
Yes.
And there was this riot between the local pandas and this man. And they maintain physical purity, they don't touch the other people and all that. So if it comes to manhandling and all these sort of efforts, so then I was asking him, how do you protect yourself? You are a single man, there is a mob and all that.
Yes.
He said, if I clap my hand, his eardrums will burst in high beating.
So she shared an interesting incident in a lineage of priests in Badrinath. The man says to protect himself, he has the power that if he claps his hands, he can make the eardrums of the enemy burst out. But there are such techniques which are in fact taught. Any questions from the back, from the ladies? Feel free. So I have two objectives. One is to satisfy you rationally. I should be logically complete, technically, scientifically sound, and yet I should open you to the full potential of these possibilities, right? So you have to tell me if I have succeeded in that, or if there's a gap, if there's a flaw, something missing, or something incomplete, something which causes you doubt. Ask freely. There are no silly questions. All questions are relevant. Yes?
I think that less than 1% or maybe 1% of the population all over the world have the power to control their consciousness essentially that
Yes.
for doing so many things. They have done
Yes.
past or maybe in the future. Only 1% of the population will be this.
Okay. So he says that only 1% of the people in the world's population has the capacity to control their consciousness like this. It may seem like that, actually it's not. And again, I come back to the physics experiments. In MIT, one of the scientists who was involved in quantum mechanics said, let me prove once and for all that psychokinetic powers don't exist. So he designed what for him was the perfect experiment. 1,000 ball bearings in a machine, put in a big pile, and gates below which open to drop the ball bearings, and channels cut to split them into two buckets. You drop 1,000 ball bearings at random, they will get 500 here, with a slight variation, 1 or 2%. But the whole thing takes place rapidly within 2 seconds. Then he asked people who claimed to have psychic powers. He said, you concentrate and try to divert more ball bearings into this bucket or that one, depending on whatever he does, he asks. And people who claimed to have powers could divert 60% versus 40% in one side. Okay, or even more, some of them could go to 70%, 30% diversion, which is big. You are influencing 1,000 ball bearings as they bounce just by willing it, and there are more which bounce this side or that side. Then what he did, he caught people at random from the streets. People who claim to have no power at all, completely ordinary, like you and me. Catches them and says, now sit down, concentrate, and will these balls to fall this side or that side. And he found the common man with no special capacity could make diversions 55%, 45%, or even some of them 60%. Which showed that in all of us, that innate ability is there. The difference is only of degree. Degree to which you're aware of it or can exercise it. The more you grow aware and the more you exercise, the more you develop in skill. It's like when you're stretching your muscles. How many of you can bend down and touch your feet without bending your knees? Right now, perhaps 1%. Only 1% raised her hand. But all of us, if we bend down every day and stretched and stretched and stretched, within a month or 2 months, we would all be able to do it. Right? So the ability is there. We just have to now develop the skill. But the innate ability has to be there because you already have within you the energy body and the mind body. And they are interconnected. They're already influencing. If you're unaware, you stay within the normal evolved channels of connection and within the limited range of your Sraddha, your conviction of your faith, which binds and limits you. I can't do it. And you've just limited yourself. How many times have you said, I can't do it? Raise your hand. Okay. We all say it. But if you could tap into yourself and say, okay, I know it's difficult, I know I've never done it, but I can. And you draw out that Shraddha, you'll find you can do it. And you have to start the process. And one of the objectives of my discussing this is precisely to empower you. That you stop believing this belongs only to one person, it belongs to all of us. It is our innate capacity to be able to overcome all our limitations and master ourselves and our environment. Then it's a question of steady process. Yes?
Psychokinetic powers do not exactly exist. But isn't parapsychology mostly all about psychokinesis?
Parapsychology is a broad term for anything which goes beyond para the domain of your conventional psychological processes. It includes psychokinesis, which is moving things by the power of your mind, will, or energy. It includes telepathy, which is communication of thought, telepathy, communication of emotions. It includes remote viewing, which is projecting to see, remote influencing, projecting to influence things at a distance. It includes clairvoyance, seeing things on the subtle level like your energy body, your aura, or for example, the aura around trees. It's not so difficult to see it. In fact, I would suggest for all of you this simple exercise. When you go into the garden, especially on a day when the sky is gray, it is easy to see it. There's high moisture in the air. You sit quietly in a place, look at a tree in front of you, and just keep staring with your eyes slightly out of focus. And after a while, you'll feel and sense and see around the tree a kind of a halo which is fluctuating. And it's not an optical illusion. You will see within it fine fibers, and some of you might even see colors. But most people are able to see immediately the kind of a brightness which is modulated around it continuously. And if you see a tree in which that is very thin or weak, you can see the tree is dying. A healthy tree will have it large. And then once you're able to see that, you turn to human beings and you'll find you can see it around human beings. So this clairvoyance, again, is an ability which is included in this. Clairaudience, hearing something which is far away. This is also part of that. Then there's a whole range of phenomena, finer distinctions, like psychokinesis is moving objects, but you can also bend metal. You've seen people bending spoons. I've seen a demonstration of a person. He did not touch the spoon. The spoon is in my hand. He points at it, and in front of me, my spoon holding starts curling, twists itself, and wilts like a flower. I take it, it's warm in the place it is bent, and very quickly it becomes hard, and then it's stuck. Examples like this galore. These are also trained, by the way. The people who teach you how to do it. There's a very famous event which took place in America. This was by a senior general in the US Army, an active general who was overseeing a program of these kinds of experiments. They wanted to create what they called the super soldier. Having developed many of these technologies, he did a presentation before the senior top brass of the military, and soon after the whole demonstration was classified. He gave a spoon to each one of them, led them through a process until most of them had the spoon bent just by the power of thought. And he said, this is the future of the military, where you do not need physical weapons anymore, your mind is your weapon. Of course, afterwards, the whole thing was classified and buried, but the people who were present there have spoken about it. So this is just to give an example. Within the domain we call parapsychological, there's a whole range. Basically, all your five senses can act beyond the physical, biological limits and not only perceive but act upon things in various ways.
Now, this yogis are able to materialize objects.
Yes.
out of thin air.
Yes. So there's one more phenomena which I did not mention, materialization and dematerialization. And I've had occasion to see that also, where a person with completely free hands is able to concentrate and then he gets an object appearing. In most cases, what they do though is teleporting. The object is placed somewhere else, they dematerialize there and then they materialize it in their hand and give it to you. There's a whole thing around that. Okay, there's another thing which is part of the parapsychological field, where you can take an object and hold it in your hand and feel its aura. And in that feeling, you can sense the people who used it and their intentions and their vibrations. So for example, if you hold a particular object, you can say, this was used by a woman and her temperament is, and you can describe her whole psychological characteristic. Why? Because having used it daily, her vibes, so to say, have suffused into the object, her aura and her emotional imprint is there. Now this is very important because it actually changes the biological processes, physiological processes. As an example, if you take a metal object that you use every day, you can use it for years, it will not rust. But you keep it inside a cupboard and you do not think about it. A few months down, you will see a layer of rust has formed. It is not the use, it is the awareness of and your interest which holds it, which modifies its processes at a molecular structure, at the crystalline level. Because the crystals and the crystalline structure are the part in metals which is most living. The life force is operative there. So if you take a metal rod, bend it a few times, it becomes warm and it becomes soft, right? The crystalline structure of the metal is broken inside. That's why it's become soft. You leave it now, and the crystalline structure grows back and rejoins now in the new shape. And after a minute you come back, it's hard again. That regrowing process of the crystalline structure is life force, prana, working at a molecular level to rearrange and join molecules. Okay? So in all metals, there is the pranic action which holds together the structure of the molecules. And as long as your prana engages with the metal prana, because you care for it, you put attention on it, it does not rust, because it is self-healing. Around this, you can build a whole technology. You see how the whole thing goes. From psychology to physiology and material technology, there's a continuity of link. So, but we were coming to materialization and dematerialization, the same principle extended, where, remember, it is the energy and movement of energy which forms the physical structure. If you withdraw the energy, or the whirl of energy is speeded up or slowed down, the vibrational character of the matter will become either denser or lighter. Until at some point it becomes almost invisible and ceases to be, but you can still hold it. So there are degrees of dematerialization even there. And at some point, if you dematerialize sufficiently, it ceases to exist on a material level, at which point you can move it around also easily, because it's no more bound to the physical sense of space. And then again, you can shift its vibrational grade and bring it back to a denser, grosser material state. Now again, if you look at what's happening inside your biology, actually such things are happening. You have a thought which affects something else, which affects something else, which affects something else until it affects your muscles, right? So there's a whole gradation of degrees of substance. At its highest level, a substance which responds to thought pressure, and at its lowest level, a substance which modifies chemical and gross physical processes, even on a physical leverage engineering level. Okay? If that exists in continuity, then you can easily shift matter also through these gradations. This is the basic concept behind it. So a pure materialization would allow you to conceive in your mind perfectly a form, and then creating in your mind, like in the dream state, you then densify it until it appears as a physical object. And at that point, if you release the mind pressure which keeps it densely held, it will lapse back into its subtle form and dissolve again. And then certain other techniques are used to give it permanence.
Two questions, Shraddha.
Yes.
When you said that we are teleporting an object, now suppose this object is being brought from one point of space to another point. Now it is traveling through space and manifesting there. Then how is it that it is not visible to the
Right.
One. Second, we have samskaras. And there is one concept called prarabdha karma. Suppose you take self-healing. So how do these samskaras and this self-healing and these prarabdha karma, how can all these be reconciled?
Okay. So there are two terms which have been introduced, prarabdha karma and sanskaras. That is, within us, there are certain bundles of, we'll use the word, knots of energy. Okay, you have a habit. You have a habit to get angry, because since childhood you found each time you got angry, your parents said, yes, yes, please have it. So now as an adult, I get angry as if now suddenly the world will dance to my tune because my parents did it and I have the habit. Now it's become a bundle in my body that when some things don't go the way I want, I get angry. So these are habitual knots which form. But not only knots can be, because they're energy knots, not only they can be formed in this, but they can be formed earlier. They can be inherited from your parents. They can be carried over also in the subtle body when you reincarnate. So there are things of this nature which are carried over from the past or inherited. And these are prarabdha, meaning prarabdha, begun before. You are not aware of its origin, it was begun before you, but which still impacts you. There is also prarabdha or a karma of not belonging to you personally, but to you, belonging to your environment. If in this space there is a strong energy knot of a particular type, coming into this space, I come under its influence and it affects my thoughts and my emotions. That's how you see there are spaces you go to and you suddenly feel peaceful. You were tired, you were upset, you enter that sacred space and suddenly you feel relaxed, free, happy, and all your problems are gone, your thoughts become clear. Isn't it? You've experienced that. Or the reverse, you meet somebody or you go into a certain place and your mind becomes completely clouded, you come back with a headache, you're drained of energy. So there are energy bundles, knots, structures, you will say, which are created unintentionally or can be created intentionally. And that's where you have a whole science. There are rituals you will find in most religions for purifying a place to make it sacred. And there's a whole rationale to that. To purify a space, to throw out the negative, confusing vibes and invoke a positive energy and so on. But the thing is, you're the temple. In your own body, your thoughts are creating the imprint. If you purify your thoughts and your emotions, you can create a space inside you that is ever pure, in which those things cannot come in. So yes, there is a prarabdha influence, but you have the capacity to neutralize the influence. So I'm going to touch upon a domain now which enters not only this parapsychological, but touches something beyond, which we will call the pure spiritual. And I want to link these two as a last step. When I have committed, say, let's say rhythms or habits or knots, or let's say anger or hatred, and it's part of my aura. When I meet somebody, my aura impacts them and provokes in them the anger or the hatred, right? You see the way it works. If you think of somebody with a lot of hate, your mind and your energies are pushing an energy of anger, hatred towards them. It touches their aura and provokes in them hate or anger, but in association with you, because it's your energy. Each time they feel the hate, they turn to you. They remember you for no reason. Their energy of hate comes to you, triggers more energy of hate, and you start a whole vicious cycle. And the only way to break that is choosing to break it. Deliberately developing compassion and love and neutralizing this vicious cycle. Okay? So a lot of the karmic knots are of this type. You've generated them and then you perpetuate them by dwelling upon it more and more. So the way you get free of karma is by neutralizing it by the opposite energy. Bring deliberately positive energy, positive thought, goodwill and love for others, and all those things will begin to fade. Yes. Sorry?
What if we are continuously provoked?
Yes. It's not a question of physical provocation. What I am pointing to is a psychological engagement that's taking place where somebody hates you and therefore you hate them, which feeds their hatred. So the first step, someone has to choose to break it. So you start by yourself, which you can choose, right? You start putting out love. And really you start seeing the person, poor fellow, he's stuck in this bundle of hatred, poor fellow. And you develop a compassion. Okay, I'm going to touch two more levels. So first is you develop a positivity, which over time, and it may not happen overnight, but it will happen. Over time, over a few weeks, you'll find their hatred diminishing. And when they feel sustained this affection and compassion from you, they will melt and begin to respond to you similarly. First level. Second way of being free of karma is you shift the level of awareness. I throw a ball, it bounces back. As long as I'm here, it hits me. But if I shift one level up, it ceases to affect me. As long as you live in a consciousness where the crude hatred still hits you, it'll come back and hit you. But if you shift yourself and purify yourself enough, that now even if someone provokes hatred, no, I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to hate, like the dolphin. Then that same energy ceases to affect you. You're free of that karma. And third, which is the most important, is that there is a higher power than your own consciousness. Can you hear me? Huh? There's a higher power than your own consciousness which can influence not only your consciousness but your environment. Call upon that. And when that descends, it can melt all these knots, including your own prarabdha, including your own karma and others, and whatever bundle of hatred we have created. And the means for that is simply asking that. Okay? Now I'm avoiding religious terms, but if you want to include the religious term, you'll say the divine and the prayer, the call for the help. And instantly there's a response, because where is that consciousness? Right here. What we call God, the underlying unifying spirit which holds the whole universe and sustains it, is not out there. It's right here. It's holding this, right? It's within you, it's around you, as well as above, beyond space-time at the same time. That's why we call it Brahman, fourfold, on all levels equally. But when you call upon that, instantly it responds. Now the question you will ask, well, why doesn't it respond on its own? Right? If it's already there, why should I have to call? It should be doing everything and fixing all my problems immediately, right? So the explanation is very simple. As long as you choose to cut yourself off, although the help is there, you chose to bundle out, separate yourself in your ego knot, in your ego bubble, right? Of your personal I. As long as you experience yourself separate, although everything is there, all the potential is there, it cannot enter through the barrier of your self-created separation. Its influence is there. And so over time, gradually, in life, situations provoke you to break out of your limitations. And that's how we grow. But it's a slow process. But the moment you stop and say, what I have is not enough, I call for help. Give me strength, give me knowledge, show me the way. Fill me with that joy and love which I lack. In the act of reaching out, you are opening a gap in your self-created separation. And through that gap which you have now consciously opened and called, the help flows in immediately. Okay? This is the third way, the most powerful way of overcoming prarabdha, karma, or whatever difficulty and circumstances are there. Remember, the power which you're calling is the power which creates the whole universe, which sustains the whole universe and nourishes it from within. It supports every atom and every galaxy. And it supports you. And for that power to make this small change is nothing. It can do what you cannot. And that's why the principle of prayer and a conscious call for help. And with it, from your side, a conscious self-giving. In love, which opens your heart, which allows the action to be most direct and instantaneous. And that's why you will see in all the traditions, spiritual and religious, this principle is given so much importance. But prayer is not a passive state. You don't say, I pray, please let the food go in my stomach and get digested. Well, you need to reach out and eat the food. I pray, let the food get cooked by itself. Well, you need to reach out and cook it. You have to understand that the help that is given, because it emerges first from the highest and from there proceeds down to the lower grades of vibration, passes within you through many levels. To the extent that you are open, it can intervene. In your mind and heart, which are most open, lovingly self-giving, those are the places where it can touch most directly. Through that, it spreads out into your other parts. Your gross physical body is the most dense and resistant, filled with the negative faith. I cannot do. I am helpless. I am sick. I am weak. It's known in the body. And to that extent, the influence feels the block, the resistance. Remember, I said self-created separation. It's there. If in the body you can awaken that call and help and prayer, then it can intervene in the body directly and lead to that what we call miraculous healing. But all depends on the degree to which you are able to open and call and give yourself to be remolded by that action. But this is the single most powerful means for not only our growth, but for overcoming all our difficulties. But when discussed in this way, in this context, you can understand why and how. There's a whole science which explains it to you also, and which does not contradict the deeper spiritual truths which are articulated in different vocabularies in different religions. You understand?
If in similar terms you are going to explain grace, how will you interpret?
Yes, the divine grace is really this action which intervenes even without your calling. When there is a real danger to survival and something needs to be protected, there's a call, sometimes not always consciously from deep within you. You may not be conscious, but there's a call that goes out and there's an intervention. But the intervention is always possible because it is part of the freedom of the spirit. Yes?
How we can control our useless thoughts.
Yes.
It's disturbing us.
Yes, absolutely. We are all victims of ourselves, our thoughts and our emotions, which are completely out of control. We are also victims of our own body's restlessness. If I tell you to sit down and remain relaxed, after a while, because I told you to sit down and not move, you'll find you need to move. But if I had not told you that, you'll be quite relaxed watching TV. You tell the child, sit down and don't move, and he will get so restless after a while. It's the same thing with the mind. If I tell you stop your thoughts, the more you try to stop them, the more active the mind becomes. But if you were daydreaming, your mind is quite relaxed and drifting, but not so agitated. So the first thing we need to learn is to learn to control ourselves. And then through that control, we'll acquire a certain mastery. And this means you have to give it time. Just as with the body, you had to give it time to make it supple, to be able to stretch it the way you want, to develop strength or any skill. It is the same thing you'll have to do with your mind and your emotions. So I will suggest 2 exercises, which you may find extremely helpful. The first exercise will help to completely change your character and shape your character and personality in whatever way you choose to. And the exercise is this. Every evening before you go to sleep, you sit for a while on your bed, and in your mind you review the whole day. Observe particularly your thoughts, your emotions, your impulses, instincts, how they formed and where they led. Like a third person, you don't make yourself feel guilty. Oh, I got angry. You should not do that. You say, here, this person said this, I got irritated, then I lost control and I burst out in anger. You observe that. And then you tell yourself, what would you want to do next time? So next time he says this and I get irritated, I will stop myself. I will take a deep breath, relax myself, and I will say, and you formulate to yourself what you will say. I will say, thank you. So the guy gives me a swear word. I say, thank you, and same to you. I practice it. I imprint in myself the new habit. You see, when you're provoked with anger and you're about to burst out, you can't train yourself. It's too late. But you can train yourself in this way. As a third person observer, I will say, thank you, same to you. And I don't care what he says. If he says something nice, I say same to you. If he says something nasty, same to you. No problem. So you create in you this state of detachment, equality, and program the new response. Imprint it. Put a will. Next time I will catch myself and not get upset. And so on. You continue through the day. Wherever you need to make corrections, positive, negative. And having done that, you take the whole day, offer it to the divine. And say, here is the thing I want to change, help me. And with that, with your heart freed from this burden, offering the burden, you go to sleep like a child. The reason why you do this before sleeping is all this will that you have imprinted in yourself goes deep into your subconscious during the sleep and molds from inside. And you've called for help, the help works inside you quietly. You may not be conscious. If you do this every day, within a week, even a sticky tendency of anger will fade out. You'll find the anger has just gone. The first day, the person will tell you an abuse, you will get upset, and you will remember to control yourself, but you may still lose. But the second day, as you're about to lose your control, you'll remember and you'll be able to check it. The third day, you'll be able to stay relaxed and then say thank you and walk away. It'll be as quick as that. And within a week, you'll find all these tendencies rapidly changing. And you can recast your whole character very quickly in this way and get free from all these tendencies. So this is one which is shaping your emotional reactions and responses as a technique. The second thing is training your mind to be quiet. And here, the method is simple to begin with. There are many approaches, but I'm going to suggest something very simple. You will notice your breath has a deep connection with your emotional and mental state. When you're angry, you're upset, your breathing is shallow and rapid. he said this. See, it moves like that. When you're completely calm and relaxed, you'll find it is slow and deep. So you use this as a reference point. If I tell you stop your thoughts, you can't. If I tell you control your breath, you can. Okay, so every time you feel you're getting disturbed, take a slow, deep breath consciously. And relax slowly, deeply. You just do it once and you'll find your mind becomes quiet. Your emotions become relaxed. You do it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Generally, that's enough to get control in a situation. So you practice this every day. So every morning you sit down. You did that at night, now you do this in the morning. After you've had your morning bath, shower, sit down. If you do a prayer, you do your morning prayer. Or if you like, first you do the quieting, centering, and then prayer. You do this, observe your breath, and take slow, deep breaths and relax your mind, relax your emotions, relax your body. And if you can combine it with prayer, you open your mind, your emotions, and your body to the divine. Invoke peace, joy, love, light, as if visualizing it or just feeling it settle in you, and remain like that. Like a vessel opening to the sunlight. And just stay. You will feel after a while a peace settling in you. Your mind will automatically become quiet. You don't have to fight the mind. And you sit like this 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, as long as you like. Enjoy it and then start the day. When you start the day, try to retain this state as long as possible into the day's activities. Later, during the day, whenever you like, you can pause. Every time you're changing classrooms, every time you stop to eat, you pause, reconnect, feel, remember, and then re-enter the activity. This would be the third exercise which you do frequently, many times during the day. The overall impact of this will be that very quickly you'll find your whole personality gets reshaped. Your mind learns to and gets habituated to remaining calm, undisturbed. And with it, your thoughts become clearer. Your power of insight, comprehension, and intuition greatly amplify. Because an agitated mind does not allow the intuition to work, which intuition is already there, remember. But when the mind is quiet, immediately all these faculties begin to act, and everything else will become easier automatically. You will remember things easier. In your studies also, you'll find a huge amplification of your capacity of mind. All that will happen spontaneously. In the training of your intellect, the first training we do is to learn to make the mind quiet. Because as long as your mind is restless, you cannot understand, you cannot retain. But when your mind is quiet, you are like a mirror. Everything just reflects on it, and it's obvious. You understand? So use these 3 practices, and you'll find it will take you very far.
So today we are part of globalized and scientific world, and materialistic need and physical beauty is that beautiful heaven for everyone. The concept of perpetual peace, how it is possible in absolute form in the society, at the same time, it is possible or not?
Yes. The concept of a social peace, is it possible at all? As long as we are split internally, that split will manifest in our social life externally. Remember, we are the cause, we are the unit of the whole, right? What we are within us reflects in our expression, in our activities. When we begin to find within us a self-existent peace, when we experience in our consciousness a deeper sense of wideness in which we feel everybody else as our family, then automatically our behavior will change towards all. And that will be the basis of a real lasting peace. So this is the point Sri Aurobindo makes, that if you want human unity, the first step is for you to find in yourself some part of the consciousness in which you feel the oneness with humanity. And on that basis, recast all your relationships. Then, when each one of us begins to do that, increasingly the basis of our interactions will change. Where right now I am separate, you are separate, and we do a transaction because it helps each other's need. We shift now. What do you do with your family? You give, you don't do transactions. To your own child, you don't say, what will you give me back when I look after you? It's your child, it's you, right? In another body. You just give with love. And that love becomes the basis of the relationships because we are one big family. Sri Aurobindo makes a very interesting observation that there are three principles which have to come together. In communism and capitalism, you find two of the principles differently organized. In communism, you try to organize equality. To create human equality, you suppressed freedom. So the whole thing became a state machine that suppresses freedom. In capitalism, you try to promote freedom, but the result was you created artificial inequalities. You become now a paid slave, doing what you hate doing in order to keep a framework of so-called freedom, which is no more free. So he says both liberty and equality are ideals which we seek, but they cannot coexist unless there is a third principle, which is fraternity. Unless I feel you as my family, I cannot live with you as an equal and in freedom. You see the point? So the first foundation has to be this deeper sense of we are one family. Now this can happen on many levels. We are one community. Oh yeah, you speak my same language. You are from the same village. Oh yes, we are one family. So we look after each other, especially when you're staying in a place which is not your hometown. It feels very nice to meet somebody who comes from your own space, speaks your own language. So that bonds you. It's not deep enough. It divides you against others who are from a different culture, different family, different religion, right? So there has to be some part in you which is wide enough to include all. And the only thing which is wide enough, if you go back all the way to the foundation, the spirit, which holds the whole universe in one single embrace. As you approach that deeper and deeper, the more your heart opens out and becomes more embracing, the underlying unity makes possible the equality and the freedom to coexist. Now it's a question of whether we as a whole can go deeper and deeper. And the deeper we go in our deeper sense of identity and unity, the more we are able to express that in our lives. So humanity right now is actually going through a massive crisis. Suddenly we've been thrown together. All our differences have got amplified. Either we beat each other up and destroy ourselves, or we make that step to go deeper and find a deeper basis of unity, deeper basis of identity. And that choice is ours. But you can see the solution is a spiritual change, an inner psycho-spiritual shift, from which then the outer social political structures will become relevant or not. But it's possible and it's within our reach. That's why Sri Aurobindo observed that the resolution of this world conflict is most likely first in India. Because here the whole culture is rooted in spirituality. You may be an atheist in India, but still the spirituality is there. Because spirituality has nothing to do with what you believe or religious forms. It has to do with the sense of the presence of the sacred and the underlying unity. You feel it, that's it. Then do you give it importance enough? Well, it's possible. You have very close by a place called Auroville, which is an entire township which is created for this purpose, where people who wish to put into practice this possibility of a human unity on a spiritual foundation are invited to come together and dedicate their lives. In whatever they do, they lean back to rest on this deeper sense of an underlying oneness of the spirit. And so it's a whole township. You have industries, you have all kinds of social structures, you have all kinds of frameworks of development, models of growth, sustainability, even different economic structures and systems where you have shared economies, shared currencies, free exchange of goods. All these experiments are at the same time. But they can all coexist because of this underlying idea of a deeper spiritual unity that holds us all together. But then Auroville has to be everywhere, even in the university here, even within your classroom, isn't it?
Sir, is there any gradation, classification in spiritual world about the soul gradation, what sense?
Yes.
Higher and lower souls are.
Okay.
And is there anything?
Okay. So the question is whether there is a gradation of souls in the spiritual tradition, whether there's a higher soul and lower soul. The idea is the underlying spirit is one. So it cannot be higher or lower. But in its expression, it can be more developed, more evolved, more experienced in expression. But the thing itself is one, the same, identical. Your soul and my soul are same. Even one, without separation. But in the way it articulates itself through you and the way it articulates itself through me, it may be different. In you, it has developed certain capacities. In me, it has developed other capacities. But in status, because it is identity, there is no greater or lesser. We are all one, equally.
In practice, we are feeling something different.
Yes.
We cannot feel the equality in the spiritual
Yes.
world.
Yes.
There are so many obstacles.
Yes.
So, who is the reason? What are the reasons behind this?
Right.
This is
So,
what I am coming to.
right, I get your point. So why do we feel these differences in our effort and in our experience? Remember the original description, the soul in the center and the layers of the sheaths around. And the sheaths may be developed, less developed, half asleep, half awake, made more transparent or closed, and all depends on the effort that we make. But the light inside is the same. So you may think of it as a lamp around which there are layers of glass, which are, so to say, colored or clouded. And so less light comes out, more of this color comes out, less of that color comes out. But if you clean the glass, so to say, you'll find the same light eventually emerging, but uniquely in you and uniquely in me. So this is the idea that underlying the whole tradition in India, dharma, which is not religion, which is the underlying truth of your being, dharma is unique to each one. So for me to impose my approach on you would be an error. Yours is a unique approach. Your light has to flow in its natural way and has its own line of development which is different from mine. And I celebrate your approach as you celebrate mine. Together we grow towards our higher fulfillment. That's the approach generally.
My question is, what are the reasons giving the whole differentiation from the light to light?
So the differentiation is possible for so many reasons. Yes. Yes.
The soul is same.
Yes.
Everybody is born equally. The root cause is the universal soul. So we are the sparks of this soul.
Yes.
So
So the differentiation is the moment you enter the domain of form. Pure spirit, as it enters form, takes on layers of its manifestation, becoming many, right? There we have all the variations. And they are different. And there you can have superior and inferior. Somebody who has developed his intellect more than somebody who has not developed his intellect. Because the form and the substance can be different. There you don't have identity. Identity is in the spiritual consciousness. But in the forms, because we take on the forms, they can have various different grades.
Here we can put this in these Advaita Vedanta terms. What you have been calling Shraddha.
Yes.
When it comes down to body consciousness, awareness as such,
Yes.
it becomes Deha Abhimana.
Yes.
So what happens is Deha Abhimana, what we call identification with these layers of consciousness, when that person interacts, identification with the body, he
Yes.
thinks he is the body interacting with another body. So
Yes.
that is where
So the important thing is, in the point she made, if you identify with your incapacity and your body's limitations, well, you will be stuck with that. But if you say, fine, I start with a body which is not so supple, but I have within me the potential to train it and to reshape it, that's where you can grow unendingly. And so each one of us has his own approach and its own line of development and growth. Was there a question here? Yes? Shall we make it the last question for today? Yes. Okay, 2 questions.
The question is about that word inception.
Yes.
How does it work? Can anyone dream under dream? Does it apply
Okay.
to everyone? So is there,
And what's your question?
Like we talk about the spiritual energy, even if someone exercises spiritual energy, sometimes after extended faith. And the other question is, sometimes we do have everything, family, money, like everything we have, still we do not get satisfaction. What energy applies that we do not give the satisfaction, even though we try to apply the spiritual energy.
Right. So 3 questions. I'll take them in sequence. The first question is in the dream state, whether it's possible to actually shape things. So the trick is actually to become aware in the dream state that you're dreaming. to become conscious. So there are many methods for training that. Do you want me to get into that, or I'll just discuss what's possible? The moment you're conscious in the dream, you can actually look at the wall and say, I want this wall, I will it to become transparent, and it becomes transparent. You can will material to shape, and it becomes shaped. So you will see the way it happens when you're not fully conscious in dream. Let's say you're walking in the forest and you wonder, what if there's a tiger? And you turn and there's a tiger right there. What if the tiger chases me and it starts chasing me? Your intention is shaping it, but your intention was led by your fear. Whatever you feared, you manifested it, you actualized it, because that's how it was. But if at that time you became conscious that your fear is doing it, you can stop and say, no, I don't want the tiger, and the tiger will shape itself out. So the technique they teach you initially is never fear in the dream. Never fear. Instead, you stare back at it. And so if in the dream you remember, oh, I should stare back at the tiger, I'm not afraid, the tiger suddenly shrinks and becomes a cat and runs away. You see, the shape is fluid in that world. The thing is in terms of energy and consciousness. So these are things, yes, all of that is possible. You can actually create extremely complex realities just like that by willing it. So your question about application of spiritual force having limits. Actually, the pure spirit from its origin, it is the power that creates the universe. It has no limit. It's when you pick a force which is intermediate that it has limits. You pick your life energy, like when doing pranic healing. I put my energy into you, it has limits because my energy is limited. But if at that moment I become transparent and invoke a higher power than I, that has less limits, depending on what height it comes from. Most of us are not capable of, as we are, to call down the highest power. It needs a very pure vessel to be able to call the purest spiritual origin. But generally what we are able to call down is the level at which we are most developed. So depending on our own personal development, we are able to engage more and more of a higher grade of energy. But potentially, as we go all the way to the highest, there is no limit, no incapacity at all. The third question you had was about why we are dissatisfied although we have everything. Whatever you may do, you're doing it in order to gain some satisfaction, right? As long as you need that thing to give you satisfaction, at some point that thing will end. And so you will lose satisfaction. So I need to eat food to be satisfied in my hunger. So I eat food. If the food stops halfway, I'm not satisfied. If I eat too much, again, I'm not satisfied. If I eat just enough, I'm satisfied. Once it gets digested, again, I'm not satisfied. So as long as you're dependent on something, in the very act of consuming it, you lose the thing which was giving you satisfaction. And therefore, you're always dissatisfied when you look outside you. But if the same principle you turn within you and seek your innate spiritual foundation, consciousness, being, there you have a self-existent satisfaction, which is not dependent on circumstances outside. That will stay permanent. So what you need really, what you're seeking for, is in the true satisfaction, true happiness, self-existent, true love, self-existent, they're all inside you, in that origin, in your essential being. There, when you find it, then you can experience anything in life and you'll be satisfied, you'll be at peace, and you'll be able to express a true love without conditions. Okay? That's the basis of the whole spiritual approach. Yes. One last question. Yes.
Have you done any paranormal experiments? How far you have succeeded in it?
Yes. I am aware of many advanced experiments. I've interacted with the scientists doing those experiments in the Institute of Noetic Sciences. You will find many interesting things. There are all their publications on their websites. Everything is open. There's a whole series of experiments called the Global Consciousness Project at Princeton University. You can look at those also, where they're measuring how the human consciousness and the collective level is impacting the vibration of matter. And this is measurable physically. So there are a whole series of experiments like this which are available. I personally, yes, have also done experiments with myself and in my own immediate environment and validated many of these things. And that's why I can speak with this conviction. And it was my objective to be able to articulate this whole domain of knowledge seamlessly from gross physical science to this occult and paranormal science to the spiritual without a gap. And so it's not enough to have a theoretical basis. I should be able to experience all these levels and their continuity. So that has been my effort in these last, 30, 40 years. And I believe I have been able to do that enough to be able to say it with conviction, yes, it's true. Yes. So the test is always in personal experience, finally. We are the laboratory. Consider that everything that exists out there is represented in us. So we can turn in and experiment and experience for ourselves all these things. So, yes.
I take one example, sir. If you send a committee a little bit mistake, you definitely fear. And why is consciousness not helping? Because even though he is always practicing consciousness, we are telling if you are doing anything practice, then our consciousness will help.
Yes.
Where is consciousness? Why is consciousness not helping himself? Even though he is practicing the same thing.
So when you are making an effort, there is always a help that is given. The help is only as effective as you accept it. If you keep saying, let's say for example, you are trying to pull a very heavy weight, and your friends come and say, can we help you? You say, no, I will do it. Then you're rejecting the effort, right? So there's a very sweet story. It's a sweet story about this priest in the temple, and there's suddenly an announcement that the floods are coming, the river has flooded over, so the whole village is being evacuated. The bus comes and says, please everyone get in. Priest says, no, I will stay here, God will save me. Bus goes away. After a while the water rises and a boat comes. And priest says, no, God will save me. Water rises so much he climbs on top of his temple, whatever religion is on the top. Now a helicopter comes. Come on, we throw down a ladder, climb up. We're here to save you. No, God will save me. Finally he drowns. So he goes to heaven, tells God, I had so much faith in you. Why didn't you help me? God says, I sent you a bus, I sent you a boat, I sent you a helicopter. What more can I do? Right? It's a sweet story, but it makes the point that the help being given, it's we who block ourselves off. I will do. And the arrogance, the ego sense and self-importance we give to ourselves and the sense of personal accomplishment. Think about how silly it is. If you think about it this way, the energy you have is not your energy. It's part of the universal energy, which is flowing through you, through the food, through the life force, through the prana. It's not your energy. The intelligence you have, your mind is a part of the universal cosmic mind. Your thoughts are not yours. They're a part of the universal cosmic manifestation, right? Everything you call I is part of a larger universal, not I, isn't it? So to claim I is actually illusory. It's foolish. It's like saying, I own money. How much money do you have in your bank account? It would be as foolish as saying, I own the air that I breathe in. Do you own it? Now I own so much. I can't hold it, right? I have to breathe out. The moment I hold it, it becomes stale. The same with money, same with energy, same with intelligence. Everything is part of the divine creation. And the illusion that we claim, I will do, I have, I am separate, is what prevents the natural movement of the divine help, which is always there. That's why the call. That's why sometimes, by grace, you get a huge crisis in life which breaks your ego. You collapse and say, I have failed. Then comes the first opportunity where you can be helped. Now help me. You've opened your gates. And then the process of real growth starts. When you think about it in these terms, you will understand why in all the spiritual traditions they will tell you, get rid of your ego. Don't be so obsessed with yourself. That's where you limit yourself. Because ego defines itself by what it is not. Remember? I am not this, not this, not this, not this, not this. And you've cut off the whole infinity of the universe to make your little self. You defined yourself by limitation. Whereas when you open yourself, you say, all this is mine. I'm part of all this. And then you release your separate bubble from the ocean. And you're part of the ocean itself. That's where all the help you will find in everything. These are not just theoretical ideas. These are actually very practical. And when you do it, you will see the influence. And it will help you to know that these are principles being taught today in management schools, even in gymnasts. Olympic gymnasts are taught this, that you don't do it with your personal effort. You have to put yourself in a state of the flow. What is the flow? Where you feel yourself one with the universe, and the universe flows through you, and it does it. You don't do it. This is basic training today in Olympic gymnasts also, and the same in management schools, which are in the more advanced training. So these are very practical principles. Okay, so we close in conclusion. There is a framework of science evolved in Europe in a reaction, but we have a more deep, complete, integrated framework in India, of which that can be called a subset. They're not contradictory, that's the subset. We need now to review our underlying framework. Just because that was reductionist, materialist, it views this purely as an abstract philosophical or religious framework. That's not true. It is a very practical, scientific framework, bridging matter and spirit seamlessly, with profound implications for the human potential. Within each one of us, irrespective of all the layers and limitations, within each one of us is infinite potential and complete freedom to be whatever we choose to be. The rest is a process of unfolding by discipline, by conscious effort, and with the help that we can invoke, everything becomes possible. Namaste.